From News 4 New York, this is a special presentation, Decision 2013, the New York City Republican mayoral primary debate, jointly sponsored by NBC4, Telemundo Nueva York, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York City Campaign Finance Board.
Welcome to the Republican mayoral primary debate, live on television and online, as well as on WOR and Radio Soleil. Good morning, everyone. We are glad you're with us. I'm David Ushery. This is an official city debate administered by the New York City Campaign Finance Board. The CFB runs the city's landmark public matching funds program, which strengthens the role of average New Yorkers' small contributions and makes the candidates less dependent on large donors. The nonpartisan objective criteria for participation in this debate were set months in advance. And now the primary is just days away. It is Tuesday. Over the next hour, we'll tackle the issues live on TV. Then we'll have a live bonus round online that runs an additional 30 minutes. And joining me, as always, co-moderator, News 4 New York's government affairs reporter, Melissa Russo.
Thank you, David, and good morning, everyone. We're also joined by our panelists, Jorge Ramos of Telemundo Nueva York and Michael Howard Saul of The Wall Street Journal. And now let's meet the candidates who met the criteria for this debate. Joe Lhota, the former chair of the MTA and a former deputy mayor, and John Catsimatidis, businessman and owner of the Gristedes grocery chain. Thank you so much, gentlemen, both of you, for being here.
And candidates, just a couple of rules. You'll have 60 seconds to answer each question unless otherwise instructed, and we'll give you an opportunity for 30-second rebuttals. So for those of you at home, we want to remind you to tweet us throughout the debate using the hashtag NYC2013. Candidates, are you ready?
We're ready.
Let's begin. We'll turn it over to Melissa.
Okay, David, thank you. 12 years ago this week, terrorists destroyed the Twin Towers and killed nearly 3,000 people. Since then, there have been other plots to attack our city, but none have been fully carried out. But terrorists are constantly changing their tactics. So what new policies will you implement to keep the city safe? Speaking order was determined by a random coin toss. And Mr. Lhota, we're going to begin with you. You'll have 60 seconds.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, for that question. And thank you for the audience at home for listening in. You know, what happened 12 years ago later on this week is that the catastrophe that happened that we know is 9/11. The reason why we haven't had further 9/11s in New York is because of the great work of Ray Kelly and the NYPD. As soon as he got into office, he revamped the NYPD so that there was a focus on intelligence and counterintelligence in the city of New York. I will continue it. I will enhance it. As I've said prior to this, I would like to keep Ray Kelly as the police commissioner of the city of New York. And if he does not want to stay, and if he wants to go on to something else, I'm going to strongly request that he be part of my transition team to help me select who the next police commissioner will be. It is very, very important that we continue everything that Ray has started.
Mr. Lhota, you have a little time left. Can you be more specific about what policy you would change?
Well, what policies I would change regarding that? Quite honestly, I would like more enhanced communication between the mayor's office and the police department and all of our communities. I think one of the most important things that we can do by enhancing communication with the communities is to have an understanding of why the police do what they do. The perfect example is stop, question, and frisk. I believe that the NYPD has been doing it according to the courts.
We will get to that a little bit later, sure. But Mr. Catsimatidis, you'll have 60 seconds to answer the original question.
Thank you. It's funny that Joe is supporting Ray Kelly because I've been doing that for the last 6 months. I have said that Ray has been doing a great job, and if he'd like to stay, I'd love for him to stay. If he doesn't want to stay, I would ask him to help pick the new commissioner. I believe that we have to keep moving in technology and keep the technology that we have, but move it further to protecting our citizens. Protecting our citizens from another 9/11 is #1 priority. I believe in the task force that Ray Kelly has had and is maintaining, and I too will maintain that task force, and I think that's one of the most important things in the world. The thing, what's going on right now with Syria, I think it's creating a big problem for New York. Already, we have alerted our police force to be even more careful. And the fact that we have to send out a signal to Washington that we don't need another war.
That's your allotted time, sir.
A follow-up, Mr. Catsimatidis, are you going to continue the NYPD's Muslim surveillance program?
I am going to have the police commissioner hopefully if it's Ray Kelly, to do whatever they have to do within the law to maintain our citizens being safe.
Mr. Katsimatidis, I'd like to follow up on that, and Mr. Loda, I will let you have a chance to respond on that as well. But some of your ads have been very specific in claiming that you'll keep Ray Kelly on the job.
I've been doing that for 6 months.
You've been saying it, but have you spoken to Commissioner Kelly about his willingness to stay on the job? And, well, have you spoken to him? We'll start with that.
I've seen Ray Kelly all the time. We served together in the Police Athletic League. And
have you discussed with him whether he would stay on in your administration?
I will not discuss specifics at this point.
Because you've mentioned, and your campaign has told us, in fact, that it would be premature for you to have that conversation. So if, in fact, you haven't had it with him, how can you make that promise to New Yorkers that you would keep him on as commissioner?
Well, Melissa, there's such a thing as body language.
Mr. Loda, you get a chance to respond to the question about the NYPD's Muslim surveillance program. Melissa's question, would you continue that program?
I will continue the program so long as it follows the rules that have been set up by the federal courts. The Handshoe Agreement provides specific requirements of what the NYPD is doing. I've been assured that they have been doing it. The reports that they're doing something wrong or illegal, I think, are absolutely false.
And Mr. Loda, what would you say to Muslim New Yorkers who feel violated by this policy?
I've been to many mosques, Melissa, and I've talked to them about it. They understand. They know that not all Muslims are terrorists and are violent. They're fully aware of it. I will work with those communities to make them feel welcomed in New York. You know, the diversity of New York is our greatest strength. If I could just answer a question about Ray Kelly, you know, as John said, he's been saying it for 6 months, as have I. There's no distinction between us on that issue.
Although you've also said that you don't think Commissioner Kelly will be interested in staying. You did say that in an interview with me earlier this summer.
No, that's right. If he's interested in staying. What I want, what John wants, it's up to Ray Kelly. It's his decision to make. My conversations with Ray Kelly have been always about whether or not he's going to run for mayor or not, up until just about a month and a half ago.
Right. It appears he's not doing that with the primary on Tuesday. Okay. And one more follow-up on the important question of police protection. Do you have plans to increase the number of police officers? The department is currently down about 4,200 officers since the beginning of the Bloomberg administration. Mr. Loda, 30 seconds, please.
Yes, I do believe we need to increase our police force. I will talk to the police commissioner about it. I think being down 4,200, we've actually seen some areas of crime actually increase. Overall, it's been very good citywide, and some communities are actually experiencing an increase. You know, the question becomes how many and how are you going to pay for it? Look, 1,000 cops would cost $70 million. That's fully loaded, including their contribution to the pensions. It's 1/10 of 1% of the entire city budget, a $70 billion budget. You know, Melissa, when I was budget director of the city of New York, I used to find 4% and 5% savings every year. I'll get a budget director to help me get that money and increase the force. Mr.
Katsimatidis, will you increase the number of police officers? And if so, how would you pay for it?
Melissa, I have said that from day one, that I would increase it 4,000 or 5,000. I said it during the last debate that I want specific police officers to be serving our housing projects and keeping those people safe. That's where 20% of the crime is of the city of New York. Joe said it wasn't within our budget to have an additional X amount of police officers. I think it's not a budget question, is that those people deserve to be safe too, and it shouldn't be about money, it's about keeping New Yorkers safe. And I would definitely increase the police force, and I will definitely keep poor people safe
okay.
too.
Quick response to Mr. Katsimatidis asserting that you've said you couldn't find the money, Mr. Loda.
I didn't say that. What I said was John wasn't doing his arithmetic right. And we had disagreed, but, you know, on how much it would cost. I absolutely believe that we need more police officers. I just wanted to make a distinction that he wasn't adding the numbers up correctly.
But, Mr. Katsimatidis, I haven't heard you say how you would pay for it.
Well, I think there's a lot of room in the budget, and I've said that publicly, that if we have a deficit, we have to work within the budget. And I've publicly said that the fact is you've got to be on the inside looking in versus the outside looking in to find those additional monies. And I did say I will freeze taxes day one. And I will freeze taxes on January 3rd, and we will work it out. And that's what I've done all my life. I am not a...
Okay. Thank you, sir. You're allotted time. Our next question will come from Michael Howard Saul from the Wall Street Journal.
Mr. Lota, you have taken credit for your work related to 9/11, but on the day of the attacks, as you know, there were massive communication problems among first responders. What responsibility do you have for that as Deputy Mayor for Operations, and does this raise questions about your expertise as it relates to emergency preparedness?
Well, what I've talked about is how I got the City of New York back up and running. My responsibilities in that afternoon and that day was to make sure that the City of New York responded in a way to the rest of the communities around the entire City of New York. And the reality is there was food delivered the next day because I worked with the federal government to make sure that food could come through the tunnels, even though the tunnels had been closed by the federal government. Garbage was picked up the next day. Payroll was paid. Welfare checks went out. My responsibilities were making sure that the city was up and running. The communication system that went in place between the police department and the fire department, and then in the fire department with the brave men who were in the buildings, did not work. Didn't work because the repeaters in the buildings had been destroyed when the airplanes hit. That has been changed in a lot of tall buildings, and I think, we've learned a lot from that. There have been numerous investigations from it, and, we're going to continue to move forward and make sure that the brave men of both anybody involved in emergency services, be it the NYPD, the fire department, and God forbid it ever happens at the New World Trade Center, the Port Authority Police.
There was also criticism of the decision to locate the Office of Emergency Management at the World Trade Center site. It was destroyed, as you know, during the attacks, and folks have said that it was wrong to locate it there because there had been a previous attack at the World Trade Center. Do you still stand by your statement that it was the right place to locate this office?
Monday morning quarterbacking is a really, really weird thing. This is the same building that the Secret Service was located in. This was the same building that the Central Intelligence Agency was located in the city of New York. It is the same building that the Federal Reserve Bank had its open market committee. It was said to be the most secure building in the city of New York. No one ever expected terrorists to actually take two airliners and drive them into buildings across the street. Look, I stand by everything I've ever done. I stand by the decisions I have always made. That's me. I stand by it.
Okay. Mr. Katsimatides, you have never held a job in government and you have no emergency operations experience. What qualifications do you have to handle a possible future terror attack?
Well, I've served in government in different ways that I choose not to talk about, but I've also served the church. I was in charge of the national Church of Greek Orthodox Church, and if you talk about church politics, that's much worse than New York City politics. And I was in charge of the whole nation for 3 years.
Mr. Lota was a deputy mayor.
And I have to rebut something that Mr. Lota has
Go ahead.
said. You have to be able to take the debits and the credits. You take credit for 9/11, you also have to take care of the wrong items in 9/11. They had the ability to fix those phones from 1993 to the year 2000. And it took them 7 years to change the phone system. Wrong, okay? I mean, the woman in the administration committed suicide over the fact that 100 extra firemen died that probably didn't have to die.
Mr. Lota, can you respond?
Sure. I've taken the debits with the credits. I just did an answer to your question. I wish John would listen to me. I actually said I will take the responsibility for what happened, one way or the other. That's me. I don't run away from the truth. I don't run away from situations, whether the decision's right or wrong. The thing you get with me when I'm mayor is you always get the truth. You'll never get me backing down, and I'll do everything as passionately as possible.
Rebuttal. You don't put 15,000 gallons of kerosene on a high floor that caused the problem and brought down the entire building. Everybody in government, including the federal government, told them it's the wrong place to put that emergency center.
No, that's absolutely not true. It was on the 3rd floor. If John thinks that's a high floor, that's his issue to deal with. It was on the 3rd floor, and it was there before the Office of Emergency Management went in there. It was put in by the Secret Service. It was put in by the CIA and other federal agencies. John, get your facts straight.
I always have my facts straight, Joe.
All right, gentlemen.
I don't have selective...
I don't have selective memory.
We're going to move on to another topic,
you have
gentlemen.
a disturbing relationship.
Jorge Ramos from Telemundo Nuevo.
Thank you, David.
God forgive us.
Thank you. Both of you have said you would continue the mayor's appeal of the judge's ruling on stop and frisk. Can you explain why you disagree with the judge's finding that the NYPD engaged in indirect racial profiling and violated the civil rights of Black and Latino New Yorker? Mr. Katsimatidis, 60 seconds.
I disagree because I don't believe a federally appointed judge should have the ability to run our police department in the way it's doing or it's trying to do. I will continue the appeal. I believe that we are keeping our people safe, our citizens safe in our minority neighborhoods. Commissioner Kelly says that we saved 7,700 lives since the last 11 years. Now, 90% of them are in minority neighborhoods. Would you like to choose which people you should go around and say you should be dead?
No, but 80% of those stops have been Hispanic or Blacks.
We save lives in Latino and Black neighborhoods. That is the key thing in the sentence.
And the judge said that that's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
Well, worst comes to worst, you know what we should do? Put it through a referendum to all the people that we're keeping safe.
Mr. Loda.
Yes, I disagreed with Judge Scheinlin's ruling because she didn't make it based on facts. Her decision was probably written in her mind before the actual facts were given. When you look at the data that was presented by both sides, and let's just look at the people who were opposed to stop, question, and frisk. They said 90% of all the stops were done in accordance with the Fourth Amendment. 5% almost there, and 5% weren't. There was a minority. What we need, minority of the number of stop, questions, and frisk. What we need to do is to make sure that the public understands what the Supreme Court of the United States allows police departments all over the country to do. It's written out in plain English. It was a 1968 ruling by Earl Warren, not your most, conservative judge, who gave the police departments all over the country the right to do this. Quite honestly, I believe that, and when the day it came out, I asked the mayor to appeal and go for a stay. He immediately went for appeal. He went for a stay last week. It is exactly what we have to do. When this gets up to the appellate division, I have no doubt in my mind that Judge Scheinlin's ruling will be overturned.
And what do you say to the fact that the police have stopped and frisked sometimes about 5 million people since 2002, since Mayor Bloomberg took office?
And we've had over, during that period of time, about a 40 to 50% reduction in crime in the city of New York. Why are we penalizing the NYPD when we should be applauding them? There's something drastically wrong here. Look at the results, and let's talk about how they did it, why they did it, and communicate to the public what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and engage the public. That's the thing that's been missing.
And what about the violations of the civil rights of those?
I don't believe that their civil rights, that their Fourth Amendment rights of search and seizure were violated as put forward by the Supreme Court of the United States.
All right, Mr. Lowe, we're gonna delve a little bit deep in this with
one additional item on that.
Well, we're gonna get to you in a second. We're gonna give you a chance. We just want to take a look at some comments that you've said, and you've referenced this 90% constitutionality, Mr. Loda. We're gonna play what you said in a recent CFB debate. Let's listen.
The reality is, and 90% of all of the millions of stops that have happened in the city of New York have happened in compliance with the constitutional rights that have been put forward by the Supreme Court.
All right, so that sounds a little redundant. You did repeat it today. But Judge Scheinlin seemed to say that 90% of those did not lead to arrest. Those stopped. And so it doesn't square with the commissioners.
No, that was a different
Right, it's a different 90.
Right.
And I want to say, is that good police policy where 90%, millions of people stopped? And
yeah, David, you're missing the point of what stop, question, and frisk is all about. It's not about making sure that people get arrested. It's about suspicious activity. The court case in 1968 didn't end up in an arrest. It ended up with a stop, a question, and a frisk. What the police did in that particular case, it was in Cleveland, and it was potentially not allowing a robbery of a jewelry store. It doesn't end up in an arrest. If they see some suspicious activity, if they see somebody opening up car doors indiscriminately going down the street, that's suspicious activity. They have the right to stop them. They have the right to question them. And based on that question, they then have a right to frisk them. They've done nothing wrong other than the suspicious activity. And that has been covered by the Supreme Court of the United States. That is not a violation of their constitutional rights whatsoever.
So you disagree with the federal judge who says most of those are Black and Latinos. 90% of them weren't arrested, didn't lead to any charge.
I vehemently disagree with Judge Scheinlin. Her ruling is completely illogical based on the actual data that was given to her.
Mr. Lota, what about all the people in communities of color who feel that they were simply stopped while walking down the street, while not doing anything suspicious?
If they were stopped for not doing anything suspicious, that is a violation of their rights.
And you don't believe
However,
the NYPD is doing that at all?
Every single one of the 250 forms, which cops have to fill out, was looked at by, I believe it was the Brennan Center at NYU who brought the case. They're the ones who came up with the fact that 90% of all of the 250s that were in there were legitimate and in accordance with the Supreme Court of the United States. You know, there's no racial profiling here. Suspicious activity, so long as there is, cops have the right to do it. Here's what's missing. This is a very, very important point. We need to communicate with the public exactly what police officers are allowed to do, how they're trained, and engage the public to understand
All right, Mr. Lota,
what the rules are.
All right, we want to give Mr. Katzimatidis a chance to weigh in. And we also want to reference something you said in the last CFB debate when you were asked what you would tell your son John if he was stopped and frisked and felt violated. Let's just listen.
What did you do to provoke it? I would say to him, were you dressed funny? Were you walking funny? Did you look funny? I would try to explain to him.
So, Mr. Katzimatidis, many of the people who were stopped and frisked felt they were targeted simply because of the color of their skin. And the federal judge seemed to put some merit in that. So can you explain more about what you meant?
Well, that's the way a father talks to his son or to his child. You know, I don't recite the Constitution like a Mike Dukakis would do. That's, you know, it's the way a father, that's the way I would talk to my son if that happened. And the fact, what I've been pushing is 21st century technology. Why frisk somebody? First of all, police or rookies need additional training. Second of all, I've urged, instead of frisking people, why don't we do what we do at the airports? Use metal detectors. And third of all, I've said that there's new technology available that you can be able to be away from the person and scan and see if the person is carrying a metal gun, or it doesn't work, unfortunately it doesn't work with plastic guns yet, but you could tell. So I would use better technology to make people feel safer in our city and be able, why frisk a person?
I just want you to elaborate a little bit more on walking funny or dressed funny. What did you mean by that you would counsel your son or ask him about that?
Well, you know, if he had his pants half down with his underwear showing, if he had his hat turned backwards, you know, just walking down the street as if you were drunk, or, you know, just walking funny. That's what I meant.
All right, we're going to move on then. You have follows? Anyone have follow? Okay. No.
The next question is for both of you. Mr. Katzimatidis, you have said over and over on the campaign trail that Mr. Lota cannot win the general election. You said he doesn't have the money. You said that he won't attract crossover Democrats and independents. You have also called him a bureaucrat. You've called him a technocrat. And to boot, you've said he's mean. On the flip side here, Mr. Lota, you and your campaign have said that Mr. Katzimatidis is trying to buy the election. You have said that he doesn't have a comprehensive vision for the city, and some of your supporters have said that he lacks gravitas. We would like both of you to react to each other's core charges here in the campaign. Mr. Katzimatidis, we're going to start with you. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. Joe, I've said it from day one, is a technical person. I'm more of a big vision person. There's nothing wrong with being a technical person, but I've been a CEO for 44 years, and I am used to hiring people to perform technical tasks. I've hired hundreds of people with the qualifications of Joe, and Joe is very qualified in technical items, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you need a visionary. You need somebody that creates. And I've created tens of thousands of jobs. I have envisioned new things for the city. And, you know, and sometimes I get criticized. But you know something? If I didn't create, and if I wasn't a visionary, I'd still be sitting on the stoop at 135th Street.
You call yourself a visionary. Other than the World's Fair, which we've all heard you want to bring back to New York City, what are the two visionary ideas that you have that'll transform New York City?
Well, me and Joe had an argument at the Transportation Forum where Joe, I believe, wanted to build an additional subway. And I said, Joe, it cost $40 billion in 40 years, and everybody would be dead in the audience. I said, why don't we build above-ways instead of below-ways? And we don't have any more ditch diggers left. I mean, what happened on 2nd Avenue with the 2nd Avenue subway, it's a tragedy. Those people are suffering. The MTA had the option of putting the entire digs underneath.
Okay.
Now, take the above way, take what they built from JFK Airport, Port Authority to Jamaica. It only cost $1.8 billion.
All right, thank you.
And in 4 years.
Mr. Lodi, he says you can't win the election. He calls you a bureaucrat, a technocrat. Response?
You know, quite honestly, I think I'm the visionary sitting up here because I've talked about ways in which we can create jobs in the city, not temporary jobs that you'd have in a World's Fair, but permanent and good-paying jobs in the city of New York. You know, quite honestly, John keeps calling me a bureaucrat. It was the New York Times who said when I left in 2001, the best part of Joe Lhota was that he didn't like the bureaucracy and he cut through the bureaucracy like a hot knife through butter. That's a fact. What he's been saying is actually not true. It's what he thinks, but it's not true. When it comes to this idea on transportation that he just mentioned, here's what I said at the Transportation Forum. We need to potentially extend the N train over to Staten Island, the one borough of the city of New York that has minimal to no mass transit whatsoever. I didn't say we need to build a tunnel under the river. We can easily build, less expensively, a bridge over the river. That's what I said. That's what I've been talking about. I talked about it when I was at the MTA. I'll talk about it now.
Can we talk electability for a moment here?
Sure.
I mean, as you know, Democrats outnumber Republicans in the city by 6 to 1. You've raised about $2 million. That's a small amount compared to how much the Democrats have raised, and certainly a small amount compared to how much your opponent is spending here.
Right.
Tell us how you're going to persuade Democrats and independents to elect you.
I'm going to persuade all people in New York to vote for me to make sure that they understand that there is a stark difference. It doesn't matter who the Democrat is. There is going to be a philosophical difference between Joe Lhota and Democrat X. It doesn't matter. They're out there talking about raising taxes. They're out there talking about more left-wing approaches to how things should get done in the city of New York. We cannot go backwards. We have to go forwards. We have to continue the policies that we've had over the last 20 years. And over the last 20 years, yes, it's grown from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1. But Republicans and independents win in the city of New York because they represent the better idea.
Mr. Katsimidis, can you just tell us real quick why you think Joe Lhota cannot win this election? The general.
Well, unless Joe can prove he has enough money to go against the Democrats and raise it in 6 weeks, that is tough. In addition, that my ability to reach out to the minorities. All the minorities I've been to in the last 3 months, they love me. I have a love factor with the minorities. I've gone to every minority neighborhood. They all give me hugs. And I have the ability to get the old Reagan Democrats, and I have the ability to get a lot of the old pro-business Clinton Democrats.
All right, thank you. Just want to take a quick moment to remind everyone home to use the hashtag NYC 2013. Tweet us if there's a question you think the candidates has not fully answered, or if you have a question that you want to add to the mix. We'll try to get to your questions in our 30-minute web-only bonus round at 12:30 p.m. The debate will end on TV at 12:30, but we will continue with that bonus round online. Keep an eye on the bottom of your screen. Also, we're going to roll through some real-time reaction to our debate from our area journalists. Gentlemen, I'm going to keep you a little bit more to the time constraints because we've got a lot of ground to cover. We'll turn it over to Melissa.
All right, thank you, David. The number of people living in New York City homeless shelters has risen 60% since Mayor Bloomberg took office. In 2002, when Mayor Bloomberg took over, there were 31,000 people living in shelters. Today, that number is nearing 50,000 people, its highest number ever. And the Department of Homeless Services says more than 21,000 children woke up in a shelter this morning. Do you consider this a failure in policy? And if so, how would you change course? We'll begin with you, Mr. Lhota. 60 seconds, please.
Do I consider it a failure in policy? No, I don't. We have a state law that requires that anyone who requires housing in New York, it must be given Giuliani administration, making sure that we build more housing shelters. Yes, we have more today in housing shelters and various different other facilities that the Department of Homeless Services has and leases out, but the homeless are not on the street anymore. So I think it's not a failure of policy that we have more. We have more because the interpretation of the state constitution, which says anybody who comes to New York can have, must be given by the city of New York shelter.
Mr. Katsimatidis?
I think we have to separate that into two categories. Category is long-term New York City residents that are suffering, that have a bad time, and I think we have to take care of those people. Then the second fork in the road is the people that get on a bus in South Carolina, pay $29 from the bus, come to New York, and get $2,000 a month in services because they can get better treatment in New York City than they can in South Carolina. And I believe we have to come up with a solution to that. Not that I mean anything bad about the people from South Carolina or North Carolina. It's that the fact New York City taxpayers can't pay for the entire world. We got to take care of our own, number one, feel bad for the other people, but we have to face the problem and see how we can solve it.
Mr. Lota, what is your position on the elimination of the Advantage program for the homeless?
The Advantage program that was cut up in Albany, yeah, I will continue to fight for that money, as Mayor Bloomberg has done. It's really, really very unfortunate that the state decided to go into that program, eliminate that money. It was a program that helped with the subsidies.
We should point out that it was a program that paid rent on a temporary basis for up to 2 years for families leaving shelter. The elimination of that program has been blamed for a lot of people ending up back in the shelter system.
That's right. We need to do everything to mitigate people who are in need of having shelter. New Yorkers who need shelter. New York State should participate with the City of New York to make sure that they have the proper housing.
So you think the state should not have cut that program?
I absolutely believe the state should not have cut that program. And one thing we have to do additionally is that we need to also understand why they're homeless. Is it just because they don't have a place to live, or is there some other particular problem with those folks, whether it's mental health or alcoholism or drug addiction? We need to get to the root cause for those folks and make sure that we
Although this program really was tailored to families who have different issues. And Mr. Katsimatidis, just yes or no, do you agree with the city and state funding a rental assistance program to help pay rent for families to help keep them out of shelter?
Well, I agree with it as long as there's no abuse in the program. And there's been recent articles in many publications that there's been quite a bit of abuse, especially from people that were big contributors.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Our next question from Jorge Ramos.
The Bloomberg administration has closed 140 schools during the mayor's 3 terms. Many parents believe they have been left out of the process. Do you think struggling schools has worked? Mr. Lota, 60 seconds, please.
Jorge, well, 140 schools have been closed, 140 schools have been opened. The reason why they use the word closed is that's the legal word that they have to use. They're reconstituted. A failing school, a school that's failing our children, it is immoral to keep it open. We need to close failing schools. We need to reconstitute it. I do believe the second part of your question is we need to have more involvement of our parents in our education process. The chancellor, whoever I select as chancellor, will have monthly town hall meetings above and beyond what's required in the law and listen to parents and understand that. I actually believe parents are an integral part of their child's education. They need to be listened to.
Now, some of the replacement schools are performing worse than the schools that were closed.
And then they have to be closed. It's not, we need to find the right teachers, need to give the teachers the resources necessary to do their job and support the teachers so that they're capable of making sure that the children get educated. We've got to get it right. All of our schools, not some of them, all of our schools need to be excellent schools.
Mr. Katsimatidis.
I have been talking about education for the last 6 months, that a lot of our schools in our poor neighborhoods have a 35 to 40% dropout rate. It's wrong. We have to fix that. I went to the Catholic Archdiocese a couple weeks ago, and their dropout rate is almost non-existent. They have only a 3% dropout rate.
What is your policy?
My policy is we go back to the good old days with trade schools, and we open more of them. And instead of dropping out, the kids have an opportunity to learn how to be plumbers, electricians, healthcare workers, nurses, whatever. If we project out the number of jobs we need in each category over the next 5 years, we should be able to tailor those schools to train people so when they get out, that they're capable of getting a job to live the American way of life and the middle class instead of dropping out and going to work at a convenience store chain for $8 an hour, which is wrong. We are mistreating our kids that way.
Should parents be more involved in the process?
Absolutely. I believe in communications. I believe in transparency. I believe in not creating a wall in between the mayor's office and parents and the community boards. I believe in transparency, and I've talked about that. I've also talked about placing a deputy mayor in every borough, so the outside boroughs don't feel like second-class citizens.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on. Michael Howard-Saul.
Mayor Bloomberg told New York Magazine in a story posted yesterday that he thinks Democratic mayoral candidate Bill de Blasio is running a class warfare racist campaign, though it appears as if he actually meant a racially charged campaign. What are your thoughts on this issue? Mr. Katsimatides, you're up first.
I know Bill de Blasio for 15, 20 years. And I think, look, I know him as a friend, but I think he is radical and I think he is wrong. Some other candidate many years ago tried to say the tale of two cities. This is one city. We all work together, we all live together, and we should not tear apart our city with that kind of action.
Do you believe that he's running a racially charged campaign? Did you agree with the commercials featuring his son?
I don't believe, some people might think so, but I believe we should just go forward, talk about the issues, and that's the important thing. The big disparity between myself and Bill de Blasio, I want to keep our streets safe. I want to freeze our taxes. That's a big disparity.
Okay.
And everybody else wants to raise our taxes, including Joe.
All right. Mr. Loda, your chance.
I'd like to get a chance to talk about taxes after I answer this question. I don't think that Bill de Blasio has been running a racially charged campaign. However, I have said that he's running a campaign based on class warfare. Instead of talking about a tale of two cities, why don't we be positive about what we're doing and talking about affordability, how we can make the city more affordable, how we can create affordable housing, what we can do to bring this city together. Look, I don't want to be a mayor who separates people apart by whatever code they want to have. I want everybody to be joined together. There's no room in the city for racial division. There's no room in the city for division whatsoever. Our diversity is our greatest strength.
All right.
All right. The next question is for Mr. Loda, and it's about one of your campaign flyers. Mr. Loda, let's take a look at that flyer. Speaking about John Katsimatides, it reads, quote, "You can tell an awful lot about a man by the company he keeps. When he had a choice for mayor, Katsimatides picked Democrat David Dinkins, not Rudy Giuliani. Vote no to Katsimatides. He's not one of us." Mr. Loda, what do you mean by that?
I mean that, when given an opportunity to vote for the future instead of the past, to vote for somebody who was competent over somebody who was incompetent, he decided each and every time to vote for David Dinkins, maxed out in a contribution. I don't know how he voted, but I know where he put his money. And he put his money for a man who was putting the city on the direction of ruin. Not only that, in 1997, he gave money to Rudy Giuliani's opponent. Didn't give him money then either. Fact of the matter is, I've seen material that has been put out most recently by his campaign that says he actually gave money to Rudy Giuliani in 1994. If he did, why doesn't the Campaign Finance Board know about it, and why aren't they reporting it?
Fair enough, Mr. Loda, but this question is about your campaign mailing, and you just said within the last couple of minutes that you would never divide the city. Isn't this us versus them type of language on your flyer
No. I'm
divisive?
talking to Republicans about who is the real Republican in this race. That's who I'm talking about. This was a primary mailer. It is not about separating people. It's about making a distinction based on fact.
But what do you say then to New Yorkers who wonder if you'll be a mayor for everyone, Democrats and Republicans, or only the people that you consider to be, quote, one of us?
As I go forward into this campaign, when I win on Tuesday night, you're going to see a campaign that unifies New York City around the direction of where we're going. I'm not going to divide this city. I'm not going to make a distinction about who's who. I'm in a Republican primary right now, and I'm appealing to Republican voters in all 5 boroughs.
Mr. Katsimatides, yes.
I've supported Rudy Giuliani in the past. I supported him for president. The campaign for president still owes me hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Joe must know about that. So I don't know where Joe gets his information from. As a matter of fact, I know the New York Times endorsed you, Joe, but they also endorsed Mark Green against Mayor Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg at the time. And they also endorsed David Dinkins against Rudy Giuliani. So what does that tell you? I believe, look, I do business in the city. I believe in supporting all the people. I've always supported all the people. I am not Washington, where we create divides between Republicans and Democrats. We got to work with both sides.
There's your allotted time there, gentlemen. We'd like to give you each a chance to ask your opponent a question, and Mr. Catsimatidis, we'll begin with you. 15 seconds, please, ask your question, and Mr. Loda, you'll have 60 seconds to respond. Go ahead, Mr. Catsimatidis, you can ask Joe a question.
Okay, Joe, in the past, there's been many corporate welfare situations during the administration where you worked in. You pledge, whether it's the Yankees or whether it's Cablevision, that you will fight for the taxpayers versus the corporate welfare for hundreds of millions of dollars. It was $400 million for the Yankees, hundreds of millions of dollars. And who would you fight for harder? Would you fight for the taxpayer or would you fight for the corporation?
I'll always fight for the taxpayer, John. This is what I've always done my entire life. The deal that was negotiated with the Yankees in good faith was about building the stadium. Mike Bloomberg didn't like it. He ripped it up. And then he gave another deal to the Yankees, which was richer and more plentiful than what was negotiated in the last days of the Giuliani administration. Cablevision, I had nothing to do with anything they were given. I was in high school when they got their tax abatement by, not Mayor Koch, by the state legislature. So, you know, you keep talking about this. I am always for the taxpayers in the city of New York. Any corporate deal that I do, retaining a company or wooing a company to come to New York, are going to have a clawback provision. They are going to have to meet certain metrics, and by meeting those metrics, they're absolutely going to be able to say, if you don't meet them, we're going to take that money back. That's what's not in any of the corporate deals right now. That's what needs to be in there. That's how you protect the taxpayers' money. When they say they're going to create 1,000 jobs, when they don't create 1,000 jobs, we get the money back.
All right. Mr. Loda, would you like to...
I just want to say one more thing.
All right, 15 seconds.
Mayor Koch, before he passed away, has said that he doesn't believe how Madison Square Garden, which is Cablevision,
no, it's not.
Well, it's a subsidiary.
No, it's not. It's a separate, privately...
but owned by the same people?
No.
Let's not deceive.
Joe, I own Madison Square Garden stock. I don't own Cablevision stock.
But who controls it? Let's not deceive the taxpayers, Joe.
Okay.
Let's not deceive the taxpayers.
All right. Mr. Loda, you get an opportunity to ask Mr. Catsimatidis a question.
I have no question for John Catsimatidis at this time.
All right. Then we will move on. The next question is about what is considered to be perhaps the single greatest fiscal challenge facing the next mayor, and that's settling the labor contract for city workers. Those contracts have expired several years ago. The city could face a $7 billion hole if the next administration grants retroactive raises to municipal workers. So the question, gentlemen, will you support the retroactive raises? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Catsimatidis.
I am not going to negotiate union contracts on television. I have, though, publicly said that there's no money going backwards. Whatever happens, it's going forwards.
So is that a no to retroactive raises going backward?
That's whatever happens goes forward, so it's no to retroactive.
Mr. Loda?
And you don't negotiate union contracts on television. It's just wrong to do.
Mr. Loda?
It is wrong to negotiate union contracts on television, but you're right to say it's a fiscal time bomb that's set on the city of New York. All 153 bargaining units do not have a contract, some for as long as 5.5 years. They deserve a raise. There's no money for retroactive pay. We need to sit down at the table. When I'm elected mayor, I'm not going to wait till I get sworn in. I'm going to begin and sit down immediately with the labor leaders in this city. I want to listen to them. I want to hear their issues. I want them to listen to my issues. And then we're going to create a roadmap for getting it done. We cannot have a legitimate budget put together unless we have our contracts done. And our workers deserve a contract.
On the other hand, both of you have been somewhat aggressive on the campaign trail, saying that you'd be tough with the unions. What do you say to voters who might be concerned there'd be 4 years of labor strife under your administration? I'll put that to you first, Mr.
I've never said I'm going to be tough with unions. I've said I'm going to be fair with unions, and I'm always going to represent the people of the city of New York. I'm not going to be elected for any special interest group, any particular union. I am going to represent the people of the city of New York. That's the mayor's responsibility. They will be fair. They will get a fair wage increase.
Mr. Catsimatidis, what do you say to voters who are concerned about your ability to negotiate?
I have been a union member. I have dealt with unions for 44 years in the city of New York. And the head of some of those unions have made statements on Bloomberg television, I believe, that John is tough, but he's fair. I believe in sitting down, and I believe in being in the same room. I don't create walls in between me and people. I am there making sure that people are communicating and working with each other. And that's by, it is reasonable to assume people will do tomorrow what they did yesterday.
All right, that's your allotted time. Melissa Russo.
Okay, this next question comes from a viewer. She's a baby boomer named Terry. She's 53 years old, and she works in publishing. She spent most of her career in nonprofit, so she has no pension for when she retires. She rents her home. She's worried that she will have no option but to move and retire someplace outside of New York City because she simply won't be able to make ends meet on her savings. She wants to know what each of you plans to do to prevent people from her being priced out of New York City. And we begin with Mr. Loda, 60 seconds.
There are millions of people like Terry, 53 years old, middle class in the city of New York, and are so concerned about how much it costs to live in the city of New York. What we need to do is find a way to reduce our size of our budget so that we don't have the pressure on our taxes. We don't have a revenue problem in the city of New York. We have an expense problem. Property taxes keep going up. It's driving up the rents. Water bills are going up double-digit each and every year. It's driving up the rents. We've got to find a way, directly as the mayor of the city of New York, to reduce our spending, or at least the rate of growth on our spending, and not have this explosion that's going on in taxes in the city of New York. For her in particular, I've got a plan in conjunction with the proposal of Housing First to build more affordable housing in the city of New York. My plan involves working with both the for-profit and the not-for-profit sector, using tax incentives to require that new buildings being built in the city of New York have a component 20 to 30% of affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals, as well as for seniors who are on a fixed income as well. That's what we need to do. We need to create programs to help the middle class in this city. We are on the verge of losing them.
Mr. Katsimatidis.
I have publicly said that I support low-income housing and also middle-income housing that nobody talks about. I believe that we own the sky. If we can negotiate with developers, instead of being zoned for a 10-story building, let them build 12 or 14. What's the difference? And build it around where the MTA subways are, so it provides transportation for the people. And negotiate the middle-income housing also to be used by our teachers that somebody has abandoned years ago, and be able to offer middle-income housing for our teachers as well as our policemen.
How would your plan help Terry?
How would it help it? Create, when you know the law of supply and demand that we all learned in school, if we can induce developers to build more, and there's more housing, and do what I said, freeze taxes. You freeze taxes, you don't have increase in property taxes. In addition, you create new housing, prices come down.
All right, thank you, sir. Jorge Ramos.
Thank you, David. During our last debate, the Democrats promised universal city identification cards for undocumented immigrants, as well as state-issued driver's licenses and free legal representation for those facing deportation. Do you agree or consider any of these reforms, and what should the city do in regards to undocumented immigrants? And Mr. Loda, you have 60 seconds.
I have publicly stated that we should have municipal ID cards. We should follow what they did in the city of Houston or in the city of Richmond. They put out a request for proposals with commercial banking institutions, those that had debit cards and credit cards. If you look at the front of the card, it's their face, it's their address, and it's not just made for immigrants, would be made for all New Yorkers, and it gives them an opportunity to do two things. If they're stopped by a police officer, that is an identification card that they can use. Not everybody in New York drives a car, so we can't use necessarily the driver's license system. But in addition to that, folks become bankable. So many people in New York don't have checking accounts. This debit card will allow them to become into the process, into the mainstream. They can put their money into a bank, and they can be able to access it in a more technological way. It's been phenomenally helpful in Houston, in Oakland, as well as in the city of Richmond. I'd like to do it here. Regarding what you asked me about overall immigration, you know, it's outrageous that we're a country of immigrants and we don't have an immigration policy. I think the bill that was passed by the United States Senate should be passed. A comprehensive immigration bill should be passed by the House of Representatives. I'm being told my time is up, but I'd like to talk
And
more.
if it's not passed, what would you do for those immigrants undocumented here in
For
the
those
city of New York?
undocumented immigrants, I will sign on day one the executive order that was originally signed by Ed Koch, followed through by David Dinkins, Rudy Giuliani, and Mike Bloomberg, making sure that immigrants have certain rights in this city of New York. I want to make sure that their children get a proper education. I want to make sure that they get access to health care. Public health is an issue that the mayor needs to be focused on.
Thank you. Mr. Katsibatidis.
I am an immigrant. I feel those people's pain because they should feel, some of them are here for 10 or 20 years, and they should feel like they're part of our society. I would definitely sign into law or by executive order or whatever I have to do, the fact that they should get cards and they should be able to live a normal life until we solve it at the Washington area. And I invest in an institution that is giving debit cards already to immigrants or undocumented immigrants. I believe we should make sure that we give them some kind of documentation so that they can live a more normal life. And that's the way I've acted all my life.
Okay, let me ask you. Earlier this summer, several police officers were reprimanded for speaking Spanish while on the job. Do you agree with the NYPD's English-only policy? 15 seconds.
I believe that English is our way of life. Being reprimanded for speaking Spanish, I don't think it's a big item. People do that amongst themselves. So I wouldn't reprimand them.
Mr. Loder.
It's wrong to reprimand somebody to speak Spanish. They could be speaking to someone who only speaks Spanish. The situation that you're talking about that's been so well publicized, a police officer, a woman, was asking another person, what kind of coffee they wanted. She explained her cafe con leche. That's as close to English as you can possibly get. She should not have been reprimanded for saying that she wanted cafe con leche.
And if you become mayor, will you speak Spanish during news conferences? Yes or no, Mr. Loda?
I will probably have somebody speak Spanish for me immediately afterward. My grammar in Spanish is horrific, and I don't want to sound like anybody who thinks they know Spanish.
Okay. Mr. Katsibatidis, will you speak Spanish?
No, I probably wouldn't. The few words I do know, I'm not very good at. But I believe we have to teach our youngsters.
Okay,
We're going to move on to our next
ask a question. I got to answer it.
No, it's true. We just want to get a little
We
bit
have to teach our youngsters that this is America, and they have to speak English.
We want to know what each of you, we'd like to know now what each of you thinks is your opponent's greatest strength and greatest liability. We'll begin with you, Mr. Katsimatidis. You'll have 30 seconds.
I think Joe is a very good person in technical items, and I've always said that. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that greatest liability, probably all the old people that used to work for him are all looking for jobs from him.
Mr. Loda?
John's greatest strength, without any doubt whatsoever, is his family. Margot, Andrea, John Jr. They're wonderful people. I've gotten to know them through this campaign, and you can tell somebody what they're like by the family that they have.
And do you want to quickly respond to his claim that all those old Giuliani staffers are looking for jobs in your administration?
If the Giuliani staffers were looking for jobs, they'd be in my campaign. There's only one person in my campaign who had worked in the Giuliani administration before. It's a claim that's based on a thought that popped into his mind.
Thank you.
Mr. Loda, I owe you some time to talk about taxes. Mr. Katsimatidis made an assertion about you. Please take 30 seconds now if you can.
Sure. I'm the only candidate running here, as well as on the Democratic side, that's put forward proposals to reduce taxes in the city of New York. I did say and stick by that I will go to Albany and I will seek to have the commuter tax, which doesn't affect the people of the city of New York. It's never driven a job out of the city of New York, and under any circumstances. The likelihood of that happening is zero. There's not a chance that it's going to come back. State legislature, without asking permission of the city council or the mayor, took it away. And quite honestly, I've got proposals for tax reductions about not freezing taxes, about eliminating and reducing property taxes, eliminating our commercial rent tax south of 96th Street, and starting the phase out of our unincorporated business tax. That's how you create jobs in the city of New York.
All right, thank you. We have a few lightning round questions for you in the final moments of our televised debate. You've both said that you've worked with some of the Democrats across the aisle. Which of the Democrats, if elected, would be best for the city? Will you answer that, Mr. Katsimatidis?
Bill Thompson is a very decent guy.
Mr. Loda?
None of them.
All right. Which Democrat would you rather run against in November, Mr. Loda?
All of them. Each and any one of them.
Mr. Katsimatidis?
I believe all of them except Bill Thompson.
All right. Are you comfortable with the government's NSA surveillance program that's been exposed by Edward Snowden? Mr. Loda?
I need to know more about it. What I've known so far is that they seem to be following certain rules by this FISA court that's there. But we need to know more about it. There needs to be more transparency and explanation to the American people about what they're allowed to do and what they're doing and whether or not that's in sync.
Briefly, Mr. Katsimatidis, briefly.
I believe that we have to know more about it, like Joe said, before we make a decision.
All right. Well, that winds up the last question for this televised debate. But of course, the debate is not over. No, there is more time for lightning. All right. I'm 30 seconds. All right. I'm sorry about that. See how even I get it wrong. Okay, good. Should e-cigarettes be banned in bars and restaurants or otherwise regulated by the health department? Mr. Katsimatidis.
Where was that? E-cigarettes?
E-cigarettes? Yeah. Cigarettes.
Well, I got to know more about it. Right now, there's additional problems with those e-cigarettes that I've just read about, that they create other problems to your health. So I'd like to study it a little bit more.
Mr. Loda?
Yes, they should be banned from restaurants.
All right. Now, I think we've reached the last question in our televised portion of the broadcast. However, the debate is not over. Much more coming up online at NBCNewYork.com, WSJ.com, TelemundoNewYork.com, TelemundoNY.com, and WOR Radio. We'll be giving the candidates another chance to ask one question of each other in our bonus half hour.
But before we turn to our special webcast, we want to show you a mobile site that's a one-stop shop for anything you want to know for Election Day. The Campaign Finance Board created nycvotes.org to make sure New Yorkers have everything they need to be informed voters. You can learn more about the candidates and connect with them through social media before primary day. You can locate your nearest polling site, see sample ballots, and even make a contribution to a candidate. On Tuesday, the polls in New York City will be opening at 6 in the morning, and they'll close at 9 p.m. on Tuesday night, so be sure to vote.
On behalf of News 4 New York, Telemundo Nueva York, and the Wall Street Journal, we certainly thank you for watching this televised portion of the Republican mayoral primary debate. We hope that you now have some good information that you need to make an informed decision on Tuesday, primary day. Be sure to turn out and vote. Our webcast begins in just a few moments. Have a good afternoon.
From News 4 New York, this is a special presentation, Decision 2013, the New York City Republican mayoral primary debate, jointly sponsored by NBC4, Telemundo Nueva York, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York City Campaign Finance Board.
Thank you for remaining with us. If you've been with us, the next 30 minutes, we'll dig deeper into the issues, ask some of your questions, and give the candidates time to ask another question of each other. And we want to remind you to join the debate on Twitter by using the hashtag NYC2013. Melissa?
And we're going to restart with a question from Michael Howard Saul, the Wall Street Journal. Michael?
So moving on to a major international issue, and as we know, New York City mayors often have foreign policy as part of what they do at City Hall. Should New York senators say yes or no on the resolution authorizing the U.S. to take military action in Syria? You have 60 seconds. Please explain your answer. Mr. Loda, we're going to start with you.
Yes, this is a very, very difficult situation that the President of the United States has put us in. He wants to take away the power of the presidency and give it to the Congress. He doesn't have to do that. But because he's done that, what we should have done when the Assad family murdered with sarin gas 1,400 of their own people is that we should have done what we've done in various other places. Genocide we shouldn't do. We need to have a regime change in Syria. I would ask the two United States senators to vote yes.
Mr. Katsimatidis?
I would say that I would ask that we don't attack Syria right now. I don't think we know enough about the situation. I think any side that we pick in Syria, both sides are against us. So, why make a move right now? Why put New Yorkers in additional danger? Because we're going to have a hyped up red alert system. Because New York is always the target. And my job is to protect New Yorkers. When we did in Libya and we did Egypt, our government picked the wrong side both times. I mean, we got Muslims, radical Muslims running the city, those countries. Egypt is going down the drain, and the military in Egypt has taken back control, and that's good. You know why? They're all West Point trained. So at least we should have some sanity.
So a quick follow-up. In 1995, as you may remember, Mayor Giuliani expelled Yasser Arafat from a concert for world leaders, and it was at Lincoln Center. And the Clinton administration criticized him harshly, as did others, saying that this was an embarrassing breach of international diplomacy. Mr. Lota, do you think that was the right decision? And if so, would you do something similar?
Yes, it was the right decision. Yasser Arafat was a murderer, and there's no place for him in the city of New York. It was one of the proudest moments for me in the Giuliani administration. If a terrorist comes to New York City, if a terrorist dares to come to New York City and tries to go to a play or go use our facilities, it's one thing to go to the United Nations and make a speech, but it's another thing to go around the city of New York proud as a peacock when you're a murderer of people. I will not let that stand.
Mr. Katsamatidis?
I think we have an obligation to the United Nations that we host, that whoever comes into New York is allowed to go to the United Nations, go to his hotel room, but to give him terrorists free reign of the city of New York, I would not give him free reign. I would make him stay in his hotel and in the United Nations building.
So Giuliani did the right thing?
Well, you know, I think you could be a little more sensitive about it.
Okay. Next question from Melissa.
Mr. Lota, the Republican Party is composed of several factions right now, and some voters at home want to know which kind of Republican you are, especially since you've been backed by Tea Party billionaire David Koch and you're backed by New York's Conservative Party. What faction do you consider yourself aligned with? You'll have 30 seconds, Mr. Lota.
You know, I'm a Brooklyn Republican. I'm a New York Republican. I'm very strong on fiscal issues. I'm a fiscal disciplinarian. I actually believe that we need to do everything we can to keep our budget under control. When it comes to social issues, I am quite progressive. I'm foursquare for marriage, same-sex marriage. I'm foursquare for women's rights to choose. And so, you know, I'm outside the mainstream of the Republican Party on a national basis.
Okay, Mr. Katsamatidis? What kind of Republican do you consider yourself?
I am a middle-of-the-road Republican. I am pro-safety in our streets. I am pro freezing our taxes. But unlike some of our national Republicans, like Paul Ryan, I am concerned about our senior citizens. We should make sure our senior citizens get what they deserve. I've always been concerned about our kids, especially our kids in poorer neighborhoods. So people called me a Republican with a heart because that's where I'm at. If you give, you know, if you tell me what's wrong or what, I have a heart.
Thank you, sir. We have a question for you, Mr. Katsamatidis. Workers in your Gristedes supermarket chain settled 2 class action lawsuits brought by workers, one alleging that they were cheated out of overtime pay, another where female employees alleged gender discrimination. What does this say about you? What should the voters conclude, if anything, about your ability to manage a city workforce of 300,000 people?
Well, let's take the facts. And you can't say the facts in 1 minute. You know, I'll ask for additional minute because you bring it up. The first lawsuit was delivery men that who got sued? We got sued, Dwayne Reed got sued, and A&P got sued. Everybody got sued. And how did it come back to us? Because the delivery company that we were employing, all 3 of us, went bankrupt, and Albany decided to go after the contractors. Those people never worked for us. We had no control over it. Let's take the second one. The second one was they went after Food Emporium. They went after Gristedes. They went after A&P. They went after all of us. A&P goes bankrupt. They go scot-free. Almost every chain in New York has gone bankrupt except for us. And what happens? 80% of those employees were union people that never complained to the union about anything wrong. So we got these professional, please listen, you got these professional lawyers going around chasing around all the New York companies. They're chasing around, and why do I survive? We had the ability to pay.
I need you to summarize. Okay, all right.
Okay, but you should get the facts and know what the facts are.
All right, there were suits. Mr. Loda, are you satisfied with his answer? Anything comment on that?
We do live in a litigious society. We need to have tort reform in the state of New York. Strong tort reform. It'll help the city of New York. It'll help private sector business. No, I don't want to join in on bashing John on this issue at all.
All right, next question from Jorge Ramos.
Thank you, David. Do you think race or gender should be a factor when hiring commissioners and your city hall staff? Mr. Katsimatidis, 60 seconds, please.
Well, you know, remember what I said, it's reasonable to assume a person will do tomorrow what they did yesterday. Part of our company in New York, 70% of our management personnel are minorities. 90% of our workforce are minorities. I believe that there should be representation from all the angle, from all the people. You know, we have so many people in New York, but they got to be qualified, and the most qualified person has to get the job. But we have to be sensitive to all the people applying for the job.
Mr. Loda.
I agree. You have to find the most qualified person for the job, but given the current diversity in the city of New York, yes, there will be Latinos. Yes, there will be African Americans. Yes, there will be Caribbean Americans. It's very, very important to understand how the city has changed over time. Quite honestly, you know, look at the examples of the past. There were more Latino and African American commissioners in the Giuliani administration than there are in the Bloomberg administration. There are more Latino commissioners in the Giuliani administration than there was in the Dinkins administration. I agree with John. Look at the past and look at what you do when you pick the best people. They come of all sizes, shapes, and colors.
Any specific name, any Latino that comes to mind?
Ninfa Segarra? I mean, that I would appoint?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking going back to a period of time.
Your administration.
Sure. You know, right now the first deputy commissioner of the New York City Police Department, Pinheiro, is somebody who's capable and is a good manager and could be very, very useful to the city of New York.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry?
Anybody else?
Oh, sure. There are, thinking about, you know, Freddie Ferrer, who I work very, very close with, both when I was deputy mayor and at the MTA, where he was a board member, is somebody who I would love to work with again in the in the Loda administration. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Since we're talking about minorities, many blacks and Latinos in the city have said that they felt marginalized during Rudy Giuliani's time in office. Do you believe there's any legitimacy to that, and should you be held accountable for any of those feelings?
You know, it's unfortunate, and as John said earlier, how many people have been saved because of the policy started by Rudy Giuliani and continued by Mike Bloomberg. The fact of the matter is, this is going to be the first term of Joe Loda, not the third term of Rudy Giuliani. I have been always known as a uniter. You talk to people in the African American community and the Latino community of how I had outreach for them when I was deputy mayor, how I continue to have outreach for them when I was in the private sector, and when I was at the MTA. I have a different experience in working with the communities. They will flock to me come November.
That's your allotted time. We should afford you some seconds to respond to that if you want, Mr. Katzmatidis.
No response.
All right, good. I want to offer you again a chance to ask each other a question. Mr. Loda, would you want to take that opportunity to ask a question of your opponent?
No, I have no questions for Mr. Katzmatidis.
Mr. Katzmatidis, do you have a question for Mr. Loda?
Well, the one thing, Joe, that I was concerned about, and I'd like to hear your explanation on that you wanted to legalize marijuana in our city. And what my concern is that our younger individuals will have more access to it. And it's been proven that the younger individuals, when they start smoking it young, that there's a 10%, 15% sometimes, hurts their intelligence quotient, their IQ. How would you feel about it, and how would you...
20 years ago, I wrote a paper about the legalization of marijuana. At that time, and at this current time, I do. I don't talk about it in this campaign for one reason and one reason only. It keeps being brought up by my opponent. It keeps being brought up by newspapers. I understand that. Mayor has no control whatsoever in the legalization of any drug. It's a responsibility of the state legislature. I will not lobby them, but what I will do is enforce the laws in the city of New York as set down by the state of New York and all of the penal codes. I will enforce the laws. Just because I have a theory and I don't campaign on it, it is not an issue for the mayor of the city of New York. You should be asking the mayor of New York, will you enforce the laws on the books? I will.
Next question from Michael Howard-Saul.
Sure. Williamsburg, Brooklyn has become a symbol of gentrification. During Mayor Bloomberg's tenure, hundreds of thousands of new residents have been able to live there safely, and new businesses have opened, while some longtime residents have been pushed out by rising rents and real estate development. The same scenario has played out in neighborhoods across the city, from Harlem to Crown Heights. Overall, have the benefits of change in a place like Williamsburg outweighed the negative consequences? And if so, why?
Well,
Mr. Loda, why don't we start with you?
Okay. You're right. Williamsburg is extraordinary, and it's a place I visit quite often. It's in my home borough of Brooklyn. And you're right, Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, they're changing neighborhoods. This is why we have to have affordable housing for low and moderate income families, for middle income families. It is very, very important. As we've seen, as crime is reduced in the city of New York, we're living in all parts of the city where we never thought we'd be living in before. And so what we need to do is be able to complement with the reduction in crime, the ability for people to have housing in the city of New York. It's a critical component, and that's why I'm so focused on affordable housing.
Mr. Katzimatidis?
Oh, I believe in developing our waterfronts. New York City has the best waterfront areas of any of our cities. And we have to be more sensitive to displacing people. The sensitivity has to stay. I don't mind displacing old warehouses. I don't mind displacing burnt out buildings. But we have to be more sensitive when we're displacing people that have lived there a long time.
So do you think the gentrification in Williamsburg was wrong, bad, not good for the city?
I think it's right overall, because we have to develop our waterfronts and create better living and better situations for all our citizens.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We've been asking people to send us some of their questions. Melissa has one now.
I do. We'll begin with Mr. Loda. What do you think of Mayor Michael Bloomberg's statement published yesterday that bringing more billionaires into New York City will actually help the poor because, as he says it, the haves pay for services for the have-nots? You'll have 60 seconds.
I said earlier today, I don't want to get into class warfare like some other people are doing in the city of New York. We should be uniting the city of New York, not dividing us. The core of what Mike Bloomberg was saying, he could have chose different words, but I understand what he was talking about, how those wealthy can, by paying their taxes, they in turn help people who are indigent. I fully understand that. That's been going on in this country for 200 years, 220 years actually. The fact of the matter is, the choice of words was a little bit harsh.
Well, is it class warfare, or is it just a financial reality with, the tax base, what it is?
It's both.
And the
it's
issues
both
that are
a
on the
financial
table.
reality and it's class warfare. It's no different than saying a tale of two cities. We should be talking about how to make this city affordable. We should talk about how to deal with people who need things in the city of New York. There's a way to do it that unifies the city instead of dividing the city.
Mr. Katzimatidis?
I think we have a problem in New York. We're number 50 in job creations. We're number 1 in the amount of taxes that we pay. And I can understand what Mayor Bloomberg said, is that we want more people to move into New York. We need, in the last 10 years, what's happened is people that make above a certain level have moved out. But when you look at the total population, it looks like it's the same. But the amount of taxes we collect are almost $30 billion less. So we can't chase out all the people that make above a certain level and bring in $8 an hour workers and say the population hasn't changed. Because what's going to happen? Look at Detroit. It's not going to happen in New York in 5 years or 2 years or 3 years, but over 10 years or 15 years, if we have a Democratic legislature that promotes that, we're going to lose.
I think it's important to note that the context for Mayor Bloomberg's comment was the recent discussion and debate over raising taxes on the rich to pay for particular programs, and specific Mr. de Blasio's proposal to pay for pre-K. I don't want to get into the Democrats or their proposals, but is it true, Mr. Katzimatidis, that the haves in New York City pay for the have-nots?
Well, you know, we pay a lot more taxes, and maybe what Mayor Bloomberg wanted to say or intended to say is that the people that make a certain level don't care what the taxes are, versus the middle class, when they get punished, they find a reason to leave. And I'm concerned about all classes. I want to represent everybody. I don't want to represent just one particular class. I don't want to punish any one particular class. And
do you think it's punishing them to raise taxes on people earning $500,000 or more a year? Is that
well, I think if you know, remember why the pilgrims came to America? Only in America, a land of opportunity. I don't think we should punish any particular class, and I believe that people that make more money are willing to pay more, and I think we should charge them a little bit more.
So I'm just not clear on whether you're saying they're being punished or they should pay more.
We should not abuse them to the point where they say, "Oh, the heck with this, let me move out."
Understood, Mr. Loda.
I think your question was Mayor Bloomberg right in saying that the wealthy get taxed and the receipts are used to help the indigent or the people who need it with programs and education? Yeah, that's the way our tax system works. That's the way it works at the federal level. That's the way it works at the state level. That's the way it's always worked. The people who have money are taxed, and the proceeds of which are used to pay for programs. It's as simple as that. His words were harsh. There's a better way of saying it. It induces class warfare, both the way he says it, the way de Blasio says it. It's not the right way to unify the city of New York. We're a diverse city. We have to celebrate our diversity, not separate us.
Before we move on, a lot of this discussion driven by an article, and the mayor seemed to raise some question about the poor in New York, or how poor they are as compared with the poor in the rest of the world. What do you think of his assessment of that, Mr. Katzimatidis?
Well, I've said that a couple of minutes ago. Over the last 10 years, our population has remained stable, but the people making over a certain amount have moved out, and the people making lesser amount have moved in. We need to stabilize our city. We have to stop the people that are moving out from doing that. And don't forget,
but this is a different issue,
if you live outside of New York less than 186 days a year, then you're not subject to New York City taxes.
But I think this raised an issue or discussion about how the sense of awareness of those struggling to really put food on the table, struggling to just make it, and how they compare with the poor elsewhere around the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you have a sense of the poor in New York City, in the 5 boroughs, I guess, is the question?
Well, everybody's struggling all over the place. I'm the one that goes to Harlem all the time. I'm the one that goes to poor neighborhoods all the time. I want to help those people. And you know something? I'm the one that wants to help their kids. I'm the one that's worked for the Police Athletic League for 28 years. And I escaped from 135th Street, and I call it that. That's where I came from. And you know what I say to those kids? And I'm going to go back to those kids. And I'm going to say to them, look, study hard, work hard. I made it. You can make it too.
All right.
And I think that's an important message to our kids, because our kids need somebody to look up to.
I want to give Mr. Loda just a chance to respond to that issue that seemed to be raised about how the poor in New York really are. You understand?
You know, the reality is the mayor started comparing poor people in New York to poor people in Africa. The comparison is not logical, and it doesn't make sense. You know, in Africa, they make whatever cents an hour. Here, they make $7, $8 an hour, whatever it is. The comparison is not appropriate for the city of New York. I believe the language is divisive. As I said before, we need to stop class baiting that we're doing in the city of New York. We need to basically respect our diversity and make sure we celebrate our diversity and try to uplift everyone. That's what we need to do, not class warfare.
Do you think the mayor's comments reflect a sense of him being out of touch?
You know, I have to tell you, I've only read the articles in the paper, and I haven't read the actual article itself, which I understand is in New York Magazine. I don't want to get in. This issue is not about Mike Bloomberg. This entire debate about who's going to be the next mayor of the city of New York.
Mr. Katzimatidis, you're a multi-billionaire as well, and some people at home may compare you to Mayor Bloomberg. How would you compare yourself? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm going to work for a lot less than Mayor Bloomberg. Mayor Bloomberg works for $1 a year, I'm going to work for 99 cents. I don't wear $5,000 suits. I wear $99 jackets. I'm a different kind of person. I grew up on 135th Street. I clawed my way out. When I meet with small business people, the small business people know that I feel their pain because I'm the one getting those parking tickets for my stores. I'm the one that's paying double and triple the water bills.
Do you think Mayor Bloomberg is out of touch?
I think Mayor Bloomberg is entitled to his own position and his own decisions, but I'm not a Mayor Bloomberg billionaire.
Very, very quickly, you both have mentioned water bills now during this debate. Do both of you pledge, if elected, not to raise the water rates? Mr. Loder?
It's not a question of raising the water rates. Think about what's going on in the city of New York right now. The city of New York leases its water system to the water board, charges it $200 million a year. It's the right hand giving to the left hand. And then they go out to single-family homeowners all throughout the city of New York and reimburse themselves. It's a one-shot. It's a budget balancer. It has nothing to do with the water system in the city of New York. You can eliminate that and drop the rates. That's what we need to do. It's not a question about freezing them. It's a question about reducing them.
So if you're mayor, the water rate will drop, is what you're saying?
I'm going to do everything I can to drop the water rates. I will do everything I can to stop this fiction that the city of New York leases to the city of New York something for $200 million. It's a joke.
Mr. Katsimatidis, quickly, same question.
I said, step number one, I will absolutely freeze everything the mayor can control. Number two, if we can find a way to reduce property taxes, I'm reducing property taxes, and I'm reducing water bills, and that is what my intent is.
Okay. Question from Jorge Ramos,
Thank you, David.
by a viewer.
New York City's unemployment rate has remained persistently higher than the national average. At 8.4%, it is 1 point higher than the national average of 7.4%. What is your plan to bring and keep jobs in New York City? Mr. Loder.
My plan to bring jobs to New York City is going to revolve around making sure that the government gets out of the way, make sure that the government provides a climate in which the private sector can expand. Right now, small businesses, which are the largest area of growth in jobs, is under siege by the city of New York with not only the amount of fines, the dollar amount of fines, and we really have to make sure that that gets under control. Fines used to be there to regulate behavior. Now they're there to balance the budget. Numerous small business people all throughout the city could hire more people if they didn't have the inconsistent application of the regulations, whether it's the Health Department, the Department of Consumer Affairs, the Parking Violation Bureau, or any of them. Our government is out of control when it comes to understanding what businesses need to prosper. And it's the government's role to make sure that the private sector creates as many jobs as it possibly can, not wage jobs that are so low, good-paying jobs. We need to make sure that our high-tech industry continues to expand. We need to make sure and take advantage of what Mayor Bloomberg has started with new college campuses to teach things other than brokerage, banking, and the law.
Mr. Katsimatidis, what is your plan?
I have gone all over the city, and I have met with chambers of commerce. I have met with small business people. I have met with the restaurant associations. And you know what it comes down to? They trust me because I'm one of them, that I'm going to do something about it.
And what is that?
I said we have a Consumer Affairs Commission. I think we need a Small Business Affairs Commission with an ombudsman heading it up so a small business person can go there and state his complaint or her complaint, and that ombudsman can be able to negotiate with the other bureaus in the city to what's right and wrong. Right now, they're stuck. You know what they say to me? Well, it's a $250 fine. If I have to hire a lawyer, it's going to cost me $500, so I just pay the $250. That's wrong. I believe when we freeze taxes, it'll give an incentive to other companies to start opening up businesses. And you know who our biggest job growth is? Small businesses. When you have the highest rates in the country and no incentives but getting beat up, who's going to open up a new business in New York City? If we freeze the taxes and they got a mayor they can trust,
Mr. Katz,
then we'll create jobs.
When you say freeze taxes, explain that a little bit more with freeze taxes, and then how are you going to pay for certain things? When you say freeze taxes...
Can I tell you something? Yeah. January 3rd, you freeze tax. Anything that we have, we freeze. In other words, if the mayor has the ability...
There's only one tax that the mayor has the ability to raise.
I have said, whatever the mayor is capable
It's the
of
property
freezing.
tax.
We will freeze it. Okay, that's my intent. I don't look for excuses not to freeze things. I am going to go in there from the inside looking out, find out where the flexibilities are, and I am going to cut taxes when I can.
Would
If
you
I
cut
can
some
do it.
services? What services would you consider cutting?
Would I, what services?
Services?
Would
I'm
you
not going to
cut them?
curtail any services. If we have a 3% difference and we go to our managers and say cut 3%, and if they give me lip, you know what we say? What does Donald Trump say? You're fired. If you can't cut 3% without affecting services, then you shouldn't be a manager.
All right, I want to give Mr. Lota a chance to weigh in on this.
You know, the idea of freezing taxes is automatic come January. And by the way, John, it's going to be January 1st when the mayor takes over office, not January 3rd.
I thought it was
And
January 3rd.
No, it's January 1st. It has been for 164 years now. But the reality is property taxes don't get adjusted until the budget is adopted in April, not in January. It's like selling, ice to somebody that lives on the North Pole. You do not have to go in and freeze taxes. What you've got to go in is with a program to reduce taxes, not wait until you get there. Understand the budget is out there. You can look at the budget, take some time and look at it. There are ways in which we can get efficiencies in the city government without reducing services and get the job done.
All right.
Rebuttal.
Michael.
Joe, I feel that you do want to do what you want to do. But when all the politicians came to you, Democrats and Republicans, and asked you not to raise the tolls, you found excuses not to listen to them.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true.
All right.
John, here's what happened.
I'll accept
Here's
what
what
you
happened
say.
in 2009. The state of New York raided the dedicated funds that were dedicated to the MTA for 20 years. The governor, the majority leader, and the assembly members, the speaker of the assembly, put in writing that there would be fare and toll increases every year. So what did I do when I was there? I didn't accept the increase that was supposed to happen. What I did is I lowered expenses in 2012 to below 2011. That's what I did so that the projected toll was not as high as it was on the books.
Rebuttal. A true leader puts his foot down and say, it's not going to happen, guys. Let's fix it. It costs.
Mr. Katz, we want to get another question here. I think you've...
Fine. I can't finish my answer?
Well, we just want to get to another question. We think we had...
Fine.
Go ahead, Mike.
You might like this question, Mr. Katzimatidis.
It's okay.
We have a question from Twitter, and a viewer wants to know, Mr. Lota, wants you to explain what you meant when you called Port Authority cops small cops.
I made a mistake then. I said it immediately after that. I'm one of those people who actually can be quite blunt and politically incorrect. I made a mistake. I hope people understand that mistake. I was asked a question during the debate about the fact that John F. Kennedy Airport is the epicenter of human trafficking in the United States. Here's what I said. I said I believe the Port Authority as an organization, as well as the Port Authority police, need to work closely with the NYPD and federal law enforcement. I should have stopped right there instead of what I said about the police at John F. Kennedy Airport.
Mr. Katzimatidis, quickly, did you want to?
I just felt Joe was wrong in that, and that sometimes when you sound off like that, it gives your inner feelings.
All right, Mr. Lota, as you know, a couple weeks ago, train service was halted for a couple of hours, so 2 stray kittens could be rescued from the tracks. You candidates had different opinions about whether you would have stopped the train. So, Mr. Lota, I'm wondering, are you comfortable with being the anti-kitten candidate in this race?
I'm not the anti-kitten candidate. Let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about the real facts here. First off, as you all know, what's more important, not this cat, the little fiery one. But
he tells people he hates cats.
No, I have never said that. I have never said
this cat
that.
here.
Maybe he
I have
thought you
never
were the
said
one
that,
on the
John.
tracks,
John,
Mr.
I don't say
Katzimatidis.
anything bad about you.
I don't
You've got to start telling the truth.
Yes.
The fact of the
I always
matter
tell
is,
the truth, Joe.
You think you do.
I always tell it.
You think you do.
Well, take a
Here's the
survey.
deal. Here's the deal. What I said was it's up to the person who's running the MTA to make that decision. It's not a mayoral decision. But I know too much. We have thousands of cats, literally thousands of cats that are in the subway system every single day and night, scurrying across the tracks. And they don't get killed. The fact of the matter is, I don't believe for 1 second that those cats would have stayed there just like any other cat, regardless of their size. For the newspapers and my opponent to say what they say about me, I never said I wanted to kill a cat. All I actually said was that we shouldn't burden the passengers of the New York City subway system waiting 2 hours in both directions. Let's look at the reality of what happens every day and apply it.
All right, we have a few more lightning.
Well, I have a. I never said anything, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're
Am I
correct.
allowed? Look, I love animals. I love cats. I love dogs. I don't think it's up to a mayor to stop a subway train, or to stop it or start it. It was just something that did happen, and it just went out of control. But again, sometimes it just shows inner emotions.
All right, gentlemen, well, we'd like to thank you. That does conclude now our web portion of the debate. And on behalf of News 4 New York, Telemundo Nueva York, and Jorge Ramos, and the Wall Street Journal, and Michael Howard Saul, and of course Melissa Russo, who's here with me, we thank you for watching and for your participation through social media.
And primary day is Tuesday. The polls are open from 6 in the morning until 9 at night, so be sure to vote.
And once again, we thank the candidates. We hope after today you have a better understanding of the candidates and their position on important issues. Have a good afternoon.